the breeze from the subway? Isn't it delicious?
If it weren't for our history books, we'd know nothing about history, but with photographs, we are able to learn a lot more, the things that can only be believed and imagined by seeing them with our own eyes. So go through these 25 unique pictures plucked from history to imagine the unimaginable. Number 25, Anne Frank and her diary. For these photographs, imagine a world where the words of a young girl transcend time and space. Anne Frank is a name etched into the annals of humanity. This young girl was born in Germany at the unfortunate time of Nazi persecution. Indeed, her story is a tragic one, but it is one that reminds us of the enduring power of the human spirit. These pictures belong to the cherished archives of her family. In one photograph, you see Anne sitting at a table with a pen in her hand, composing the words that would later be responsible for bringing her global fame. The backdrop to Anne and #30. Nine's journey is the secret annex in Amsterdam. She, her family, and a few others sought refuge there from the persecution of the Nazis. In the summer of 1942, Anne started filling her diary pages with the real accounts of her life and others who were present with her in the sanctuary. At first, it was just a diary filled with young girls' private musings. However, inspired by a speech of the Dutch Minister of Education, Anne crafted a novel based on her experiences. Her diary transformed from a private refuge into a testament to the strength of the human spirit. Yet, the cruel twist of fate brought Anne's story to a tragic turn. In 1944, their hideout was betrayed, and Anne with her family was transported back to the Westerbork camp. A year later, Anne Frank succumbed to typhus and passed away at the mere age of 15. Currently, her diary and legacy are recognized by UNESCO as part of the World Heritage. It symbolizes remembrance of the Holocaust's horrors. Number 24. Women's suffrage. The tale of the suffrage movement in U.S. usually starts with a familiar tale. The year was 1848, when a group of brave individuals rallied around Seneca Falls in New York. They set forth a comprehensive list of demands for women's rights, which included the long-sought-after right to vote. Yet the history of women's involvement in American politics goes far beyond. One of these photographs was captured in 1915 in Alaska. Around this time, women in a dozen states, including Alaska, had secured their voting rights. Nevertheless, it's worth noting that, in some places, these rights were limited to municipal or presidential elections. In 1917, the suffrage movement achieved a major milestone when New York State passed a suffrage referendum. These pictures mark a significant moment in history and showcase the struggle for rights that were a privilege back then. In another image, you can witness the suffragists marching in a parade through the town of Mount Ayr, Iowa, with a population of around 1,700 in 1915. Nevertheless, the following year, the state and #30, Nine's all-male electorate rejected an amendment to Iowa and #39's constitution that would have expanded voting rights to women. In another powerful historical picture, you can witness the powerful refrain, "and quotienting as we climb," and quote, famously championed by black suffragist Mary Church Terrell. It became the rallying cry for numerous organizations such as the Arizona Federation of Colored Women and #39S clubs. Fast forward a century, we can see the struggle come to fruition. Kamala Harris, for instance, stands as one of the 26 women serving in the Senate, while another 101 women hold seats in the House of Representatives. This progress would have been inconceivable if the women in these photographs and more had not fought and won their right to vote. Number 23, Harlem Hellfighters. Talking about struggles and victory, it would be amiss to not include accounts from the World Wars. When you think about the history of both World Wars, African-American soldiers might not be the first thing that comes to mind. This picture of the Harlem Hellfighters will change your perspective. It's indeed true that African-American soldiers played a pivotal role on the front lines, and one group that certainly deserves the spotlight in this one. Initially, Harlem Hellfighters were renamed the U.S. 369th Infantry Regiment. They were tasked with relatively mundane duties like unloading ships and cleaning latrines, all the typical assignments for African-American soldiers during that period. But their story takes an interesting turn when General John Pershing, the commander of the American Expeditionary Forces in Europe, offered the 369th to the French army to address a complex political issue. At the time, the French and British were in desperate need of American reinforcements for their depleted divisions. Pershing, acting on orders from President Woodrow Wilson, had been adamant about forming an independent American force in France to maintain troop morale and to take into account the American casualties. His mission was to strengthen Wilson's influence. As history tells us, these troops spent 191 days on the front lines, fighting for their lives and the honor of their nation. This was a remarkable feat, as no other American unit had spent this amount of time on the front lines. On February 17, 1919, Fifth Avenue in New York City filled with a massive crowd that gathered to celebrate the Harlem Hellfighters in a victory parade. Their valor in action during World War I earned them the prestigious Croix de Guerre from the French government. The original picture is not colorized, yet someone took the time to do so. It breathes life into these incredible men and their contribution to the world. Number 22. Ruins of Hiroshima. The aftermaths of war are a grim reality that the world has to grapple with, and who knows that better than the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki? On August 6, 1945, an American bomber unleashed an atomic bomb upon the city of Hiroshima, changing the reality of the world forever. The consequences were more than devastating. Over 80,000 lives came to an abrupt and tragic end. These haunting photographs are a glimpse of the aftermath. They serve as a reminder of the sheer horror of war and nuclear weapons. In an instant, the bustling city was reduced to ashes, and all left was the ruins. You can witness in one of these pictures the shape of a victim burned into the steps of a bank. Did you know that the heat and light produced by the bomb were so intense that it literally changed the shades of roads and buildings? The only areas that remained closer to their original shades were the ones covered by human bodies. If that wasn't enough, the heart-wrenching narrative continued just 3 days later when another atomic bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. The combined death toll from the two attacks reached approximately 200,000 people. This unparalleled tragedy in Japan stands as the first and, thankfully, the only instance in human history where nuclear weapons were deployed in warfare. Number 21. Chernobyl. The perils of nuclear technology have been witnessed by the world time after time. On April 26, 1986, the city of Chernobyl came under the wrath of these weapons. On that fateful night, an explosion rocked the fourth reactor at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. It was marked as the largest nuclear accident in history. As expected, this catastrophic event released an unprecedented amount of radioactive substances into the environment, the consequences of which were more far-reaching than ever. These pictures represent the real heroes of this incident, the firefighters who displayed immense courage and selflessness. Putting their own health on the line, these firefighters rushed to the scene. Remarkably, these men had no protective gear designed for working in a highly radioactive environment. Instead, they were clad in their standard combat gear, wearing gloves and helmets with only the Smoke and Gas Protection Service equipped with gas masks. Everyone involved in the initial firefighting efforts suffered from radiation sickness. Most of these individuals succumbed to the effects of radiation within a year. These nameless heroes are forever immortalized in these photographs. Number 20. Operation Dominic nuclear tests. During the height of the Cold War, a series of 31 nuclear weapons tests were conducted by the U.S., and this captivating photograph exactly captures a moment from this operation. Operation Dominic. This test was conducted on May 11, 1962, and was codenamed Swordfish. Now, this test had a rather particular focus. It involved anti-submarine missiles and W-44 nuclear depth charges. For all of you wondering, these depth charges were specifically designed to target the Soviet submarines. Nevertheless, Operation Dominic extended far beyond Swordfish. Adding to the dangers, it also encompassed within itself a set of high-altitude tests known as Operation Fishbowl. These tests featured the detonation of warheads launched atop Thor missiles at altitudes, ranging from 30 to 248 miles above the Earth and -30. Nine's surface. In the pursuit of this crucial mission, several tests faced challenging setbacks. Some missiles were destroyed in flight by range safety officers due to electronic failures like bluegill, rocket motor malfunctions, or deviations from their intended flight path. Among these tests, the Bluegill Prime incident was particularly disastrous. The missile was blown up while still on the launch pad, which necessitated the extensive reconstruction of the severely damaged and plutonium-contaminated Thor launch facility. Operation Dominic and its various tests were a reflection of the tense geopolitical climate of the Cold War era, and this photograph is a memo of those times. Number 19. Titanic. Moving on from the horrors of nuclear testing, this picture rather depicts a cheery scenario. But as we are all aware, the tragedy that follows doesn't match with the depiction. On April 10, 1912, at 9:30 a.m., a grand spectacle unfolded. The passengers of the Titanic began their onboard at the port of Southampton. Little did they know their fate was sealed to be cruel. The Titanic was a marvel of shipbuilding at its time. The pier was filled with well-wishers who waved joyful farewells to their loved ones, and this photograph serves as a flashback. When viewed today, however, it does take on an eerie sense of foreboding. The Titanic, on its maiden voyage, struck an iceberg and ultimately met its tragic end. In this devastating disaster, almost 14,906 lives were lots or times. Number 18. Mother Teresa. Now, there are few people in history whose compassion and dedication to alleviating human suffering have been unmatched. One of them is the person you are viewing in these pictures today, Mother Teresa. She was a Catholic nun filled with relentless compassion, due to which she devoted her entire life to helping impoverished individuals. To fulfill this noble mission, she made the decision to leave her convent and live amongst the destitute on the streets of Calcutta, India. And in almost all of her historical pictures, we see her working alongside undernourished children who desperately needed her love. In the midst of filth, disease, and abject poverty, Mother Teresa was a beacon of hope. Her dedication to serving the less fortunate earned her significant recognition. She became the inaugural recipient of the Templeton Prize for her contributions to religion, and was also awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for her tireless efforts in aiding those in need. She was laid to rest in Calcutta, the city where she had made such an everlasting impact. Remarkably, 5 years after her death, the Catholic Church beatified her, solidifying her legacy as a symbol of selflessness and compassion for generations to come. Number 17. Marilyn Monroe. As Mother Teresa is an icon now, Marilyn Monroe was one as well, in a different sense. This woman was a symbol of feminine beauty who left an indelible mark on Hollywood and popular culture. Here you see one of her most famous photos that was captured during a film shoot in September 1954 at the intersection of Lexington Avenue and 52nd Street in New York City. The film in question was, quote, "The 7-Year Itch," quote, and it featured Marilyn in a starring role. During the shoot, a crowd of press and onlookers had gathered to catch a glimpse stood over a subway grate. As luck would have it, periodic wind from the passing subway cars lifted her skirt, resulting in a flirtatious moment that drew eager applause from the spectators. Naturally, photographers seized the opportunity to capture this unforgettable scene, and the images quickly became incredibly popular. However, what seemed like a glamorous moment in the spotlight proved to be rather disastrous for Marilyn in her personal life. In the midst of this provocative shoot, her husband, the renowned baseball player Joe DiMaggio, was among the crowd of spectators. He strongly disapproved of the spectacle, and after the shoot, their relationship spiraled into scandal. Not long after, the couple filed for divorce, marking the end of their marriage. Number 16. Earth from space. Back in October 1946, American scientists managed to achieve a groundbreaking milestone. They captured the very first image of Earth from the vantage point of space. Now, this extraordinary feat was made possible by a 5.2 ballistic missile and a 35mm camera. The rocket, carrying this camera, was launched from the White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico. As the rocket ascended, it reached an altitude of approximately 105 kilometers, where the camera began taking photographs at 1.5-second intervals. The mission reached its peak at that point, and the rocket began its descent back to Earth. Unfortunately, due to the impact, the camera itself was shattered, but here and #30, named as the incredible part, the film reel containing the photograph remained perfectly intact. It seems like the universe wanted us to see the Earth. The images you see on the screen sent shockwaves of excitement witnessed our planet from this particular perspective. Given today, we are used to witnessing these images of our planet from orbit. But it's important to remember this was truly sensational for its time. Number 15. The first ascent of Everest. While scientists were busy capturing Earth from space, a few brave individuals, early 20th century onwards, were busy conquering the highest point on Earth, Mount Everest. However, their endeavors were met with repeated failure, primarily due to demanding physiological challenges posed by the mountain and #39's unforgiving conditions. Yet, hope persisted. Then, on May 29, 1953, a monumental breakthrough occurred. Enter Edmund Hillary from New Zealand and the Sherpa mountaineer Tenzing Norgay. These two individuals successfully ascended the summit of Everest via the South Col route. The stages of their daring screen ensured that this historic moment would be forever preserved. Number 14. Freda Koo. What you are viewing on the screen right now is none other than Freda Koo. For those who don't know who this eccentric woman is, let us give you a background so you can truly appreciate these images. Freda was a renowned artist hailing from Mexico in the early 20th century, but she was no ordinary artist. These images capture not just her physical appearance, but also the deep emotional connection she had with her subjects and her art. Every brushstroke seemed to carry the weight of her emotions, whether it was joy, bitterness, or pain. Her distinctive style was a reflection of her individuality. Intricate hairstyles adorned with woven flowers, long dresses, and skirts reminiscent of the traditional attire of women from the Mexican state of Oaxaca. What many might not realize is that beneath the loose-fitting clothes, Freda concealed a corset and a leg prosthesis bearing the physical reminders of her enduring pain and resilience. Freda Koo was one of those remarkable individuals who could convey their essence without uttering a word. Although we can never truly know her personally, looking at her photographs allows us a peek into who she was. Number 13. Martin Luther King. Back on August 28, 1963, something extraordinary went down in Washington, D.C. What was called the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom brought together around 300,000 individuals. While all these people descended upon the Lincoln Memorial, the star of the show was none other than the legendary Martin Luther King Jr. In this iconic snapshot, you see MLK. He is brimming with self-assuredness, and we all know how he kicks things off. And Outland, although we face difficulties today and will face them tomorrow, I still have a dream. End quote. He was not just talking about any old dream. He was talking about a dream where everyone, no matter their race, could stand on equal ground. That speech of his, it and #30, nines etched in history as a 20th century oratory masterpiece. King wove together the American dream, biblical references, and the magic of repetition. End quote. First have a dream, end quote. Echoed through the air 8 times, each time driving home the idea of equality. Number 12. Nelson Mandela. Beholding the same spirit of strength as MLK, on February 11, 1990, after 27 years in prison, Nelson Mandela was released. Most famously known for ending the apartheid in South Africa, Nelson Mandela's liberation was televised as it was a monumental moment in history. Photographers took numerous shots, journalists conducted multiple interviews, and the people celebrated their hero's freedom ecstatically. In one of the photographs, you can see Mandela walking hand in hand with his wife, Winnie. You can see their happiness at Nelson's freedom, and their joy itself is shared by the entire world because it's not every day that you see the first person who fiercely fights to protect his African people. Nelson proceeded to become the first black president of South Africa, and during his time, he achieved significant milestones. As deserved, in 1993, Mandela was awarded the Nobel Prize, and in 2009, he was recognized by the UN as the symbol of hope and peace. Number 11. F18 Going Transonic. Now this image is for all the science geeks. Do you know what this is? What you are seeing on screen is a spectacular view of a high-speed jet going transonic. Basically, it's a cloud of condensed water that has formed around the plane just because it passed through the air filled with moisture at super high speed. This is a F-18, and it was photographed at the exact moment a perfect cloud formed. So cool, right? Now, this happens at one point only, and at this point some parts of the jet are supersonic while others are subsonic. This is a testament to mankind's high-speed travel achievements. Number 10. NASA's Ingenuity Mars helicopter. This is another one for space enthusiasts. This picture is a captured moment in time when NASA and #30's Ingenuity Mars helicopter made its maiden flight from the Martian surface. You are looking at history in the making, as this is humanity's very first unmanned, powered, and controlled flight on another planet. This is an absolutely mind-blowing feat preserved forever. Number 9. Annette Kellerman and #30's risque swimsuit. Meet Annette Kellerman, a Sydneysider born with a rare case of rickets. When she was 6 years old, her parents enrolled her in swimming lessons to beef up her leg muscles. Interestingly, she loathed swimming, but it became the reason was her fame. Love blossomed in the unlikeliest of places, and swimming became her thing. Fast forward to the early 1900s, Kellerman was making waves. At the mere age of 16, she set a record by winning the ladies' 100 yards and mile championship. You need to see this photograph because this is the first time any woman wore a one-piece bathing suit, and it was none other than Kellerman. Oh, and did we mention she got arrested for her swimsuit choice? Number 8. Gandhi with a spinning wheel. This is a historic click from 1946, and it features the iconic Mahatma Gandhi with a spinning wheel. Gandhi utilized this spinning wheel to weave a true movement. In his ashram, everyone had to spin, and he set the example by starting at the crack of dawn, 4 a.m. Gandhi believed that the best way to tackle those British colonizers was through non-violent resistance. He urged his people to boycott British goods and practice daily activities that aligned with their principles. In no time, the Indian spinning wheel became a symbol of this resistance. Now here and #30's the interesting part. In Hinduism, the wheel holds a special sacred meaning. It symbolizes the eternal cycle of rebirth, the quote wheel of samsara, end quote. What Gandhi hoped was that by getting people to use the spinning wheel, he could liberate India from violence and lawlessness. In one way or another, he did succeed. Number 7. Family photograph of Romanov Dynasty. This family photograph is one with a tragic history. The man at the center is Nicholas II, Russia and #30's last emperor. He took the throne back in May 1896. But he wasn't just interested in ruling the empire. Nicholas was a man of many hobbies, including foreign books, hunting, and collecting cars. Yet what's really intriguing is his love for photography. He'd take out his camera and take pictures of his family during everyday moments and vacations. This photograph dates back to 1913. You can see his wife Alexandra and their 5 kids in this. What's tragic about this story is that none of the people in this had a happy ending. 5 years later to his picture, the entire Romanov family met a grim fate and was executed. Number 6. Salvador Dali. Now you have entered the creative world of Salvador Dali, the surrealism maestro in 1948. These photographs capture him in action as he sits at his easel in a zoo. This is where the masterpiece, The Elephants, emerged from. In this surreal painting, you and #39, find 2 elephants sporting outrageously long, spindly legs, carrying massive monoliths on their backs, all set against a fiery red sunset. The Elephants was a game-changer as it marked Dali and #30's farewell to surrealism as he ventured into a new realm called, quote, nuclear mysticism. Quote, experts speculate that these elephants symbolize the end of Dali and #30's surrealist era, making, and quote, the elephants, and quote, a remarkable swan song to the surreal. Now it's time for today's subscriber pick. Before we move on to show you the top 5 historical photos you must see, go on and give this video a thumbs up and click the notification bell right now, or ghosts of the past will appear in your nightmares. Recently, one of our subscribers shared a historical image with us that has left him wondering about one question. Does history really repeat itself? You see, he was going through old newspaper archives in his attic for a history project when he stumbled across this picture. At first, he didn't think much of it and kept it in his folder. However, later at night, when he glanced at it in clear light, he couldn't believe what he saw. There was an additional man in the photograph who looked exactly like the man in the center. Who is he? Is he a ghost or a doppelganger? How did he end up in this archival photograph? The subscriber is dumbfounded, and he hasn't been able to find any substantial answers. But we are certain that you can help us solve this mystery. Remember to comment down below and let us know what you think. Now, on to the next topic. Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein needs no introduction. His name is practically synonymous with, and quote, brilliance, and his E=2 mixed square equation. We all know that equation. However, what we want you to see is the lesser-known snapshot from 1931. Here, you can see Einstein standing by a blackboard packed with equations. The interesting thing about this is during this lecture, Einstein filled up a small blackboard with solutions, and while his students were busy copying it all down, he left the room for a while. But when he returned, he found a much larger blackboard in place with the same equations. Today, that blackboard is a star exhibit at the Museum of the History of Science in Oxford. Number 4. The first flight of Wright Brothers. Wilbur and Orville Wright are the duo who showed the world that humans can take flight. And it all happened in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina on December 17, 1903. Their masterpiece was Flyer 1, an aircraft that went down in history. One of these pictures shows Orville at the controls, and Wilbur helping Orville keep things balanced. Flyer 1 soared to a height of 3 meters and stayed up for 12 seconds. On the same day, they went for round 2, and this time, the aircraft covered over 260 meters. Number 3. Roswell Incident. Roswell Incident is a UFO tale that and #30's still buzzing today. Back in July 1947, some mysterious metal and rubber bits popped up near a village in New Mexico. This was the cue Roswell newspapers needed to shout that they had gotten proof of aliens. Wasting no time, the strange pieces were sent off for investigation with General Roger Mason Ramey leading the charge. From the pictures, you can see he was all over those fragments. But the very next day, he dropped a bombshell. It was no UFO. According to him, it was just a run-of-the-mill weather radar balloon. Here, the Roswell buzz died down. However, to this day, UFO fans swear Ramey didn't reveal the entire truth, and that was actually a UFO. Will we ever know for sure? Is time? The aircraft covered over 260 meters. Number 2. Beatles and #30's first visit to U.S. For this segment, we are going to take you back to February 7, 1964. This was the day the Beatles touched down on American soil for the very first time. Little did they know, they were going to take the U.S. by storm. By then, their songs were already causing a frenzy in the States, and fans were counting down the seconds till their arrival. But the most unexpected part was the fact that when they first landed at Heathrow Airport, around 4,000 fans had swarmed in to bid them farewell. When the plane door finally swung open and the Beatles walked down the ramp, you can imagine the uproar, screams, cheers, and the start of Beatlemania. These photos became an instant cultural sensation, marking the kickoff of an era we now know as, and quote, Beatlemania. Number 1. First colored photograph. Many people think that the first colored photograph came around the 50s. However, that's not true at all because it actually made its debut in 1861. And the mastermind behind the picture you are seeing was James Clerk Maxwell. He was a British physicist with serious color expertise. It was then that Maxwell dropped a knowledge bomb on the world. You can create any color by mixing just 3 primaries: red, blue, and green. Inspired, he teamed up with photographer Thomas Sutton for a groundbreaking experiment. Their subject was a tartan ribbon bow against a black velvet backdrop, basking in the sunlight. Maxwell used 3 vessels filled with red, green, and blue liquids as filters. These liquids got their color from various salts and metals, which got them 3 negatives in hand. Then, Maxwell pulled off the grand finale. At the Royal Institute, he lit up those 3 negatives with lanterns and matching filters. The result was a single-color projection of the tartan bow, a marvel of color photography. And just like that, in 1861, Maxwell and Sutton kicked off the era of color photography, proving that brilliance knows no bounds. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.